So hello, welcome everyone to this evening's session of the Berkeley Forum here in the beautiful Morrison Reading Room. My name is Daniel Ahrens and I'm the president of the Berkeley Forum. Before we begin, I'd like to remind the audience to please close all laptops, silence all cell phones, and use of anything that could distract during the event. We're happy you're here joining us at the Berkeley Forum here tonight. The Berkeley Forum is a nonpartisan student-run organization that hosts talks, panels, and debates on the Berkeley campus. Driven by students, for students, our members work tirelessly throughout the year to enhance intellectual discussion on campus by bringing speakers to talk about the most urgent ideas of our time. Every aspect of our events is run by our student staff, from event photography, marketing, financial development, speaker invitations, moderating, and much more. Please subscribe to our events on Facebook and stay updated on our webpage at forum.berkeley.edu if you're interested in learning more about our organization. Tonight, the Berkeley Forum presents a discussion with Carla Hayden, the 14th Librarian of Congress, entitled Preserving History in a Digital World. Tonight's event is brought to you in partnership with the University Library. The University Library is an internationally renowned research and teaching facility at the nation's premier public university. The library is composed of more than 24 service locations, including the Doe and Moffat libraries, the Bancroft Library, and many specialty libraries. The library offers extensive collections in all formats, and robust services to connect users with the collections and build their research skills. I'd like to thank the University Library for working with us on this event. Following Dr. Carla Hayden's address tonight, there will be a student-moderated question and answer period with our student moderator, Kelly Kagovitz, followed by an audience question and answer period for all of you to join in. With that, I'd now like to introduce Dr. Carla Hayden. Dr. Carla Hayden was sworn in as the 14th Librarian of Congress on September 14, 2016. Hayden, the first woman and the first African American to lead the National Library, was nominated to the position by President Barack Obama on February 24, 2016, and her nomination was confirmed by the U.S. Senate on July 13. Prior to her latest post, she served since 1993 as CEO of the Enoch Pratt Free Library in Baltimore, Maryland. Hayden was nominated by President Obama to be a member of the National Museum and Library Services Board in January of 2010 and was confirmed to that post by the Senate in June of 2010. Prior to joining the Pratt Library, Hayden was Deputy Commissioner and Chief Librarian of the Chicago Public Library from 1991 to 1993. She was an Assistant Professor for Library and Information Science at the University of Pittsburgh from 1987 to 1991. Hayden was Library Services Coordinator for the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago from 1982 to 1987. She began her career with the Chicago Public Library as the Young Adult Services Coordinator from 1979 to 1982, and as a Library Associate and Children's Librarian from 1973 to 1979.
They're wondering how old I am.
There we go. More recently, Hayden was president of the American Library Association from 2003 to 2004. In 1995, she was the first African American to receive Library Journal's Librarian of the Year award in recognition of her outreach services at the Pratt Library, which included an after-school center for Baltimore teens offering homework assistance and college and career counseling. Hayden received a bachelor's degree from Roosevelt University and a master's and PhD from the Graduate Library School of the University of Chicago. With that esteemed biography, I'd like you all to please join me in welcoming Carla Hayden to the stage.
Thank you for that, and you just said, sorry for reading all of that. The person who loves to hear that always is my mother. She's not here, but she loves hearing it, and thank all of you. I just want to start by saying that I hope you all know that you have what we call in librarianship a rock star in terms of your university librarian. Could you stand up, Jeff? He started, well, he said, I'm not a librarian. Yes, you are, and that's even better. He started a movement with graduate library science programs, the I-schools at University of Michigan. So he's well known for that, and he is also someone that we are very proud of because he doesn't look like a librarian. And that's even better. Thank you also for giving me an opportunity to connect with one of your seniors that's going to be graduating next week,
Couple weeks, yeah.
in a couple of weeks. This young man, I'm going to totally embarrass him. I've known him since he was about 4 years old. His mother is one of my dearest library colleagues, Patty Wong, who we say is our barometer of truth and justice in the profession, and has always been someone who has stood for the people's right to know and information, and so to see him all grown up and a senior is special. And also a young lady whose grandparents worked at the Library of Congress. I was also told that this Morrison room is a place that people have connected with their future spouses. That's something that happens in libraries, so you're there. And of course, a real renegade, Brewster Kale from the Internet Archive, who's here to, and I can't wait for his questions. It's a special joy to be in a setting that gives me an opportunity to really discuss something, as you can imagine, when you've heard that I've been basically in the library field most of my adult life. However, in the interest of full disclosure, I am an accidental librarian. When I graduated from undergrad, Roosevelt University, the school that was dedicated to public service that in Chicago, that Eleanor Roosevelt actually helped found, and it was founded on public service. And so I was political science and history, thinking about what I was going to do, but needed employment. And so I would go in between job interviews to the Chicago Public Library because libraries had been part of my life. And during waiting between interviews, and I don't want to discourage anybody that's graduating, but between interviews where they told me you have no experience and come back later, I would go to the Chicago Public Library, and one of my recent graduate colleagues said, "Are you here for the library jobs? They're hiring anybody with an undergraduate degree in anything." And so I like books, I like reading, and here I am in the library after between interviews, and I went upstairs and filled it out and said all that, and they hired me, and they put me with a lady on the south side of Chicago in a storefront branch. And she was in jeans, and she had frizzy hair. This was the 70s, and she wasn't black. Okay, and she was on the floor having story time with children with autism. And I thought, this is not what I thought libraries were about. And then she said, "Hey, I'm a student at the University of Chicago Graduate Library School, and you should think about that." And seeing the impact on the ground in a storefront library, my first job was filing cards in the catalog, and I'll talk about the card catalog in a minute. The impact of bringing information and knowledge and being that person to help people in a somewhat challenging situation led me into the career of librarianship. The other aspect that was very important was when I decided to teach in library school, University of Pittsburgh, and I was sending out graduates and telling them, you are going to be information navigators, and you're going to empower to the people, and you go and you're going to change the world. And one of the graduate students came back to me and said, I'm back from working in an urban library, I'm going to enroll in the PhD program. Well, why? And he said, because you said all this stuff, you inspired me and everything, and so I got this position in an urban library, not to be named, but in the East Coast, kind of north. And you sit me there, and so I saw the director of the library system, and I was and I went up to him, and I was telling him about my ideas and how I wanted to do and everything, and he brushed me off. And I thought, well, maybe I need to go back to school or do something else. I don't know that. And that's when I decided to leave academe and to put my money where my mouth was and to go into library situations that you could still teach, you could still be part of the knowledge industry, but you would make an impact. You may ask, how did I end up at the Library of Congress? The largest library in the world with 162 million items. And when we use that statistic, think about, you say, wow, but wait till I tell you more about that. An item might mean a collection, a manuscript collection. I am Pei, the architect who turns 100 this month. That item, his collection, has boxes and boxes and boxes. Next to that is the collection of Sigmund Freud, and I saw Albert Einstein. You can come on in, there are a few chairs up there. But there's Albert Einstein in the corner, and we have the collection of Sigmund Freud, who had a correspondence with Albert Einstein. Those types of things. Also, the largest collection of comic books. You have a wonderful comic book collection outside. The Library of Congress has the largest collection of comic books in the world. One of the largest collections of photographs. I like to say that the superlatives, the largest, the biggest, the most, really is something that the Library of Congress can claim. The presidential papers from George Washington to Calvin Coolidge, Teddy Roosevelt's diary that he kept in his pocket that has that date, February 14th, when his mother, his wife, died on the same day, and he crossed it out and said, my life is over. Clara Barton's papers, Lee Strasberg, the theater coach. Branch Rickey, the baseball, and I know in this Bay Area that's a little touchy. I'm from Chicago, we're still celebrating. Largest collection of baseball memorabilia, but also the scouting records of Branch Rickey, the scout, that, and you can read his assessment of Ernie Banks, Sandy Kovacs, Don Drysdale, Hank Aaron, saying that they had talent. All of these treasures. And the last picture taken of Harriet Tubman, and also recently acquired in cooperation with the Museum of African American History, one of the earliest photos of Harriet Tubman. The treasures, when I think about them, are breathtaking. Someone said, what's your greatest surprise since being the Librarian of Congress? And I said that it's that on those 838 miles of bookshelves from Washington, D.C. to Iowa, there are still treasures to be discovered every day. And the curators and librarians are still discovering things that haven't been looked at. Oh, did I mention the world's largest collection of sheet music? Half of the collection is in languages other than English, and the library collects in 470 languages. Largest collection, research-based, and a librarian whose professional career has been centered on accessibility and making materials accessible is now the Librarian of Congress. So how and what really motivated me to accept the call to serve. And I say the call to serve because that was the operative word. When I was asked by the President President Obama, would you serve as the 14th Librarian of Congress? he indicated that he had access to so many things that he had seen at the Library of Congress. The contents of Abraham Lincoln's pockets the night he was assassinated. I'm from Illinois, you're from Bloomington, so we kind of connected there. Springfield on one side, Champaign, Urbana on the other side. The treasures that he was able to see, and he said, would you serve as Librarian of Congress and make those things available for everyone? And that's what hooked me. Because I thought about that storefront branch in Chicago and the access. What if people had the access to those treasures, this treasure chest, this America's library right there? What if that young child at the corner of Penn and North in Baltimore with that unrest could have looked up and pulled up the papers of Rosa Parks, and when the young child, and I stood there in that window with her, she was 10 years old, and looked out at the ravages of the store that had been burned down, and the car and the carcass and all this stuff, and she looked at me and said, what's the matter? What are these adults doing, basically? And from the safety of the library. Wouldn't it have been wonderful if I could have gone to the computer terminal that was there, that people had knocked on the door the next day after the unrest to get on those computers to look for jobs, but to pull that up for her, to show her what Rosa Parks felt when Rosa Parks said in her own handwriting, I just couldn't take it anymore. And then get into a discussion of those. Those are the types of things that are possible, and the challenge, and one of the reasons why I'm working with all types of groups and people to see how we can take this wonderful treasure chest and open it up in the digital world. There are a number of challenges, as you can imagine. I spent time this morning talking with people about big data, and they admitted that the Library of Congress has big data and terabytes and they were, in fact, they were, I think, a little overwhelmed when we started talking about just how much data we had, and the fact, another big thing, we have the largest collection of historic motion pictures as well. How we can mine the data from those manuscripts, those letters, those diaries, also film. How can we make those things accessible and searchable? So you have large amounts of data that need to be made accessible, and then also not just accessible to researchers, but to people with different abilities and interests. The simple things are things that provide access to the programming at the library. Something like the Berkeley Forum, where we live stream from the Library of Congress the programs and send them out to libraries. Putting up the basic papers for access. The George Washington papers are up. Those types of things. Making it easy for people to mine those manuscripts, that you don't have, for instance, a curator. We're looking at papers, I mentioned Sigmund Freud and Albert Einstein, and so this curator was just casually mentioning about the correspondence between those two, Sigmund Freud and Albert Einstein. Imagine, what were they talking about and why? And Sigmund Freud was, Albert Einstein was writing to Sigmund Freud to find out, why do you still want to have war? And Albert Einstein was saying, because humans have evolved, there's no really, why do they still need war? And after 16 pages, Sigmund Freud said, I don't know. Interesting thing to think about. The wealth in the curators is also something that people ask me about. What's your biggest joy? And I had to step back since being Librarian of Congress. It's working with those curators, those people 40, 50 years. Just casually, what's in those manuscripts? How do you get that knowledge up and made digital? That's your metadata. That's you're really getting that in. A librarian and a curator that can casually just say, with a question from a middle schooler, we did a, you may know I'm tweeting, so we're tweeting this. I started right after my swearing in, because these treasures, I thought I knew as a professional librarian about the Library of Congress, but I knew I didn't know everything, so I started. And every day, with the able assistance of Roswell and Sina, who's right here, I put up something about these discoveries, and everybody says, oh, the Library of Congress has, and fill in the blank they didn't know. So we're trying to work on mining the information from the curators and relating them to younger people. So we had a, what was it called, a tweetathon. We had a tweetathon with the Discovery Channel, and you can imagine, and I'm watching my group here because this is what they're afraid I might say, but I'm gonna say it. So it was with the Discovery Channel, and it was the first time the Library of Congress had this tweetathon during History Day with middle schoolers. And so we set it up in this nice room, and we had our 42-year-old, 40-year, tenured professor-type curators sitting there. Almost, you can't smoke in buildings anymore, but you could imagine the pipes, right? I mean, these are the people. And we paired them because we kind of knew that to do a tweetathon might be a little challenging because there was some resistance. And so we paired them with the younger librarians and laptops sitting next to them. And it was a little chilly at first. A little chilly because here are these students from all over the country, and they could see us, and we're tweeting, and there's questions are coming in. Who was the first president to do this? Who was the president that got stuck in a bathtub? Does anybody here know? You do not tap. So, at first the kids were, trying to do that. And then, so they wanted to know, are there any, because Hamilton has really generated a lot of interest in historical characters. Are there any more cool dudes in history? I said, there's some dudettes, some women, Susan B. Anthony, there's some other people. And was there anybody with the Declaration of Independence around those times that was a vegetarian? Right? Well, out of the mouth of the most resistant, Pat sitting back kind of saying, what is this? Well, Benjamin Franklin, in his correspondence from Paris, and he was there and so and so, so and so, talked about his Benjamin. I believe that says that he was a vegetarian for a time. And we all just went, see? And then they started to kind of groove on it. How can I, because at first it was like, how can I've been here 42 years, I am the curator of whatever, right? How can I distill what I know into 140 characters? What? But then it was something to see it. And what we're finding is not only doing all the technical part, big data and searchable the terms and that's where you're working with the computer experts and all of that, but it's the human knowledge and the human capital that we are concerned about, and making sure that that's translated and is given the value and the respect that it's due. So we'll be doing more tweet-a-thons, reaching out, and it's almost like Jeopardy. And the curators are very protective of the information. I mentioned Roswell, who's doing social media and things like that. I'm going to call him out on this one. Roswell wanted to have, and he called it trivia night, right? And he was severely reprimanded. It's not trivia. These are fascinating facts. And we tease him to this day. The other thing, and I'm getting to the culture of librarianship. I have been a librarian my freshman career, and there is a culture of librarianship. A book I would mention by D. Garrison. It's a feminist examination of librarianship. Melba Dewey is mentioned prominently, not for the reasons you would think. Someone should ask me about that during question and answer. Let's just say he could be current in many ways. The book, though, that really, I think, captures some of what is going on now as we look at data sets and putting information online and making it accessible, that I'm going to do, a shameless plug, is the new book on the card catalog. Now, how many of you have used it? Well, you have one right there. Okay, but have you used it? Oh, that's right, this is broken. We just released this. And it's the history not only of the card catalog, but the attempts to organize information, starting with scrolls, and you can imagine having just scrolls of information, but there was no way to distinguish one scroll from the other, and the Library of Alexandria. So it really goes through how humans had tried to organize information that led to the earliest catalogs that were book catalogs, when the revolutionary idea of listing who the author is, what the subject is, all of these types of things that led to 3x5 cards in drawers with various ways to get at an item of information that led to that. And the Library of Congress was the really forerunner and the main institution, and I think that's poetic justice, that we were the institution that made it into a production, that libraries all over the world were buying Library of Congress catalog cards. My first job, as I mentioned in the book, was putting those cards into those drawers. Sets of 15. If the book was complex, you had 15 cards, every which way to get to that book. Think of what you would do with a search now. And there came a time in the 1950s, early 60s, that they realized that millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of cards were really difficult to handle, and that's when machine readable cards and that was developed. And this book ends on the end of the card catalog and how it progressed. The other book, so you still had the organization by subject headings for the card. The other book, and this one they really don't want me to mention. Of course I will. And I just picked it up at City Lights bookstore recently, so I had to go there. I always go to bookstores and thought, this is ample. I'm in San Francisco or Berkeley. So I go in and I see this book, cruising the library. And I'm sometimes not the most hip person. So I see the stacks, I'm thinking, oh, this is great. And then I open it. And then what can a body of literature do? Okay. Well, they're talking about lots of bodies. And the things that I didn't even know. But it all was the Library of Congress classification system. It's all about the library classification system and how they classify difficult information and all of that. It is really something. And I understand that one of the instructors at Berkeley uses this book to teach either cataloging or something like that. But the chapter that interests me there were a lot of chapters, was what happened when I was part of a cataloging challenge in terms of how you organize knowledge, and that's when it was in the 70s with the terms for African Americans. Going from Negro to Black, do you do that? The whole C also, was it African American with a hyphen? I mean, it was Afro, you remember AFR. Oh, I kept thinking of my grandmother. They were so proud to be called Negroes. Now here I am trying to get it, put 4 cards over to the side. It was quite a contentious aspect of cataloging knowledge and how do you refer to things and still have access to the historic references to people, things, and some things that are simple like aeroplane, A-E-R-O-P-L-A-N, and then aeroplane. So in looking at the challenges, but I'd like to say the opportunities. Someone told me, Carla, with your confirmation, the Library of Congress is in the news. Librarians are having a moment, right? People are interested in librarians, and we like to say in there, I'm going to end with this. In this time of concern about authenticity and balance and fairness and information, librarians are in a position to restate their claim. We have our t-shirts, librarians, the original search engines. We wear those proudly. And to also be at the forefront of looking and assessing information. We have made that part of our, it's almost an oath, that we look for accuracy and authority. And so it's a wonderful time to be here and talk, and I can't wait to hear some of your questions or comments and just open it up because she just put the stop now card.
Thank you again, Dr. Hayden, for that amazing address. I think that as many of us who've all grown up with our own librarians, it's like dream come true to see you here. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Haley Kaglovitz, our student moderator, for the moderator portion of the evening. So we'll start off with some questions from her and then move over to you guys. So round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us here today, Dr. Hayden. I'd like to start off and ask a little bit about your background. You mentioned that you are a residential librarian, and your predecessors have had different jobs ranging from historians to poets to basically just a whole host of things. So what aspects of your background as a librarian have specifically guided you in your current role, and have you faced any challenges because of what your role has been?
I'm glad you mentioned the fact that, and I'm just getting some, that there have been different people in the position of Librarian of Congress since the first Librarian of Congress in 1802. The library was established in 1800. Oh, and this is the library's birthday, too. The first Librarian of Congress was actually part-time and was the clerk of the Senate. It took about 2 or 3 tenures to get to a full-time librarian. There have been 2 other librarians of Congress who had public library backgrounds. One that was the head of the Cleveland Public Library, and then Putnam, who was the longest serving, 40 years as librarian, and he was part of the Putnam Publishing Company family, was the head of the Boston Public Library. So at different times, lawyers, authors, historians have been librarians of Congress. And what is really significant, I think, in terms of my tenure now, is that libraries in general are undergoing such an evolution, rapid change, rethinking, revisioning what they are in so many ways on campuses and communities, that having a person who has the library focus at this time, I hope will be helpful. And in terms of challenges, I mentioned, and I had hoped that this would come up, the culture of librarianship. That treasures and values also accuracy and being careful and being correct. And in a digital age and in some that pursuit of perfection, sometimes there's a tension with that. Could you put up some data so we can get started rather than the full metadata on something, and then maybe even crowdsource some of that, which causes some tension because, well, how do we know these people? Who are these people? So that's where the challenges are. It's also exciting because you realize that you're at a point in the evolution of libraries and the world that you don't see and get to live in many times.
And part of the evolution that you talked about that you're hoping to bring is to make the Library of Congress and other libraries more accessible.
Yes.
So what type of steps are you taking, are you able to take to make your media more accessible to people?
I mentioned digitizing materials, and not so much the book collections and that's a more cooperative thing with other libraries because there aren't, in terms of unique items, that is really the priority for the Library of Congress. No one else has Teddy Roosevelt's diary. No one else has the things that we have that distinguish us. Your library and your special collections has unique things. And to digitize the unique things first is where we're looking at our digital strategy and prioritizing. Also things that relate to curriculums, K through 12 curriculums. What would be useful? And I know this is something that might sound a little revolutionary, things that people just might be interested in. Not the serious researcher all the time, but what are some of the things that are in the collections that you have? So those scouting reports during baseball season, why don't we put those up for opening day? Why don't we look at what's happening in the world and connect our collections to those things that people are thinking about, wondering about, and that. Also that live streaming of anything that is site-specific at the Library of Congress. We had Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg here with class, being able to make that available at another time. these types of programs that would be wonderful for people to see that aren't able to be in Washington, D.C. And also traveling exhibits, downloadable exhibits, of course, our web presence, but actual 18-wheelers that are going to go through the country and pull up in Bakersfield. That's going to be our first site. One on the East Coast, one in the Midwest, and one on the West Coast, and it will just go into communities and will be interactive and downloading. So all multi-phased and layered access.
Because you own so many of these unique artifacts, a significant responsibility of the Library of Congress is to preserve world history. And over the course of history, many accounts have been lost, whether it be by accident or on purpose. So as a result, our perception of history could be potentially skewed in favor of the surviving accounts that we do have. So how does the Librarian of Congress ensure that its collection represents an accurate version of history?
There's a wonderful, and I'll just share this anecdote to let you know just the depth of the experience. We were giving a tour to some people, and we were showing them what we call America's treasures. These are things that are in a special vault. I don't even know the code. They have to call security to get in there. It's iced, and go in, and there is the draft, Thomas Jefferson's draft of the Declaration of Independence, with footnotes and annotations by Ben Franklin and John Adams. And you can see where they crossed or covered over the word subject and put in citizen. And you see all of that. You see the paragraph that dealt with slavery that in the final version they took out because they knew if they kept that in there about slavery, they couldn't get the Declaration of Independence passed. And they said, we'll deal with slavery later. So you see these authentic treasures, and we're showing them to some people. Gettysburg Address, Lincoln's reading copy of the Gettysburg Address in his own hand, and you're looking at that. And one nice lady said, well, how do you know these are real? Now, part of my job as Librarian of Congress is to be somewhat a mediator between the curators and the people who spent their life working with these materials and people who will say something like that after checked by security and involved. And what was very good to be able to say was there's an entire research and investigation unit at the Library of Congress. And not only do they preserve materials and check the paper, but they actually do forensics and the provenance. And they spend a lot of time on authenticating the documents and that, and whatever is there, and making sure that they can document the provenance of whatever it is. The challenge that's coming up in the digital age is how do you preserve different versions of things when people are editing online, and that how do you preserve drafts in the digital world? You won't be able to possibly see what was changed when you get something in that. And so a lot of institutions and groups are thinking about that and saying, you know, what is the final version, but where are the other ones, and how do you store them, and how do you do that? That's the challenge going forward. It's somewhat easier when you have the actual documents and you can see them.
And beyond just multiple versions of the same, online document, there have been a lot of new forms of media that have arisen since the Library of Congress first started, and something that has had increasing significance in documenting history has been social media. In 2010, the Library of Congress announced that it had partnered with Twitter to take up, a whole database of tweets and was going to begin archiving that for research purposes. But thus far, that information is not public to everyone, and neither is, similar types of archives of, Snapchat stories or Facebook Live videos. So, how do you make decisions about what types of media you prioritize archiving for others?
Well, the Twitter archive is very interesting because when the library made that arrangement, I've been, of course, looking into that. It was to capture basically the start of the use of social media with the Arab Spring and all of that, and how social media was starting to be used in social movements. And in a very short period of time, it became what they're calling a fire hose now, Twitter. Some people take pictures of what they eat. And I'm sure there's some, culinary historians years from now will probably want to see what people thought was a good meal. So now you have, and I don't think anybody could have predicted how the social media and then adding the video and the Snapchat and emojis and the this and the, so now it's just whoa. And it's been called a fire hose of information, and the curating of that type of information is a challenge, but also an opportunity. Where are we going to look, and what types of institutions are going to capture things? The National Archives, for instance, is responsible for the official records of the government. And so the Library of Congress was capturing and working with that as a potential collection to be researched in the future. And we're working to see how that can happen. The archives, in terms of official records, is now having to grapple with all of the electronic information coming from all types of agencies and that. And so that was the only time I was not jealous of David Ferriero at the archives when he talked about his challenges with that, because that is quite something.
With this fire hose of information, as you call it, there's a lot of different types of things, as you say, from brunch to important tweets for social political movements, but there's also interesting cultural trends like memes or viral videos. So what do you think the role of the Library of Congress is in preserving these trends?
And that's where the curators and getting real connections between our more seasoned, let's say, curators, and because they make decisions about what collections they go after or what collections they think will inform a view of the past. And the most exciting part is, what do we collect now that people will find useful 50 years from now? What is it? That's an intellectual and sometimes instinctual exercise that information sciences and library, everybody's thinking about that, historians. What do we collect now? What will people want to research, and what might be significant? So it's an exciting time to be in information science and to think about that.
And you mentioned in your talk the impact that this type of information and bringing it to communities can have, but it would seem that as the Librarian of Congress and the head of this huge organization, you would be a little bit further removed from the small types of libraries. So what can you do as in that?
So this lady works at the Oakland Public Library, and she said, "Oh, I missed you yesterday, Saturday." Oh. Because I was at the Oakland Public Library. And what I'm trying to do is make sure, so I'm here at the Berkeley Forum, but I also spent the day at the Oakland Public Library at toddler time. If you ever want a humbling situation, go to toddler time. Mother Goose on the loose. In terms of what that, and also their African American Museum that they have, and then I spent time at the San Francisco Public Library and their Teen Mix studio. They have special funding. That is the most inspirational facility I've seen in a long time. They have sound studios, recording studios, movie studios, and the kids designed the space. They got special funding, and they run it, and they have all types of activities. And we talk with them about Skyping with us as we think about how we can bring information to those types of facilities for those kids that are there. A lot of them were kids who found the library as a place of refuge because they were different, or they were quirky, or they were all types of kids, but they were there in that library doing cool stuff. So what I try to do is balance talking with the software engineers and the curators and things with still keeping boots on the ground and going into places, going to campuses, going to places to get that balance.
So I've got time for one more question before we're going to turn it over to the audience, because I'm sure you guys are all excited to talk to Dr. Hayden, but
Well, Brewster is.
I'm sure that you're asked this all the time, but I'm very curious, and I'm sure our audience is as well. What is your favorite piece of media that you've been able to bring into the Library of Congress?
The favorite piece of media. But now it is being able to use the social media in interesting ways and connect with people. It has been enlightening for me. I think the staff members are kind of excited. They are giving suggestions about what I should put up, and that introducing social media in a way that connects to so many people. It's scary. You are opening up to everyone. I had never heard of trolls except for the 3 Billy Coats crowd. Trolls librarian, so I didn't know. But that type of opening up and bringing that to make it a regular part of what we do and thinking about all the other types of social media that we can use.
Well, thank you so much for answering my questions, Dr. Hayden. I'd now like to open it up to the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand and make sure to speak up, and I'll call on you. So we've got one in the back over there.
Thank you so much for a fascinating presentation. One of the big challenges of making information accessible in the digital age is going to be ensuring that our copyright laws are well balanced and appropriate. I'm wondering what you can tell us about the future appointment of the Registrar of Copyrights and the ongoing location of the Office of Copyright within the Library of Congress.
Well, I can't say much about the future location. That's up to Congress. And copyright law is not my purview. What I can tell you, though, is that the basic operation of the office, the modernization, getting 32 million scannable records to be searchable has been my priority and what I'll be working on. So that's what my main focus is and what I'm responsible for. There's Lister.
Yes, well, the digital opportunity.
He's called a renegade in the
Right.
you know.
So I want to live in your digital future. Yet many people in the librarian community seem hesitant to sort of go there. What would be your advice in sort of the area of sort of the culture of librarianship towards getting us going?
Thank you. I kind of touched on it earlier. The culture of librarianship is to make sure before, that's the covenant almost we have with the public. We will try to give you the best and most accurate information, and we will check and double check, and we won't do it until we are sure. And in this fast-moving digital age, that's almost, it's almost at odds with that culture of librarianship, of being sure, being right, and convincing them that some data is better than no data, because it might take years, or that's what's going on in a lot of places. It's also, though, helping us in terms of authenticity and authoritative things, because people know that if librarians say it's cool from chewing gum to anything in commercials, you know that's some good gum. Often, a stereotype is used commercially.
Kind of a segue to that, or goes along with some of the other things. I'm also a public librarian. I work with adults from high school on up. And we, helping kids study, have traditionally referred them to .gov sites as sites that they trust their teachers will accept over Wikipedia. And there have been some changes made to .gov sites, and it's tough as a librarian to still refer a kid to a site.
Amen.
And
Is that another library? Yes. And librarians, as you know, though, are also participating in Wikipedia and adding, in fact, the Library of Congress. Can I talk about that? I always have to check now. Because some things aren't ready to be talked about, and that's basically what it is. It's in the soup. I've got a lot of things in the soup. Stirring the pot and doing things like that. But this part of working with Wikipedia to add some of our links and sites to that, and have libraries working on it, other libraries also contributing to Wikipedia and trying to make it more authoritative. The .gov part is part of the National Archives, and the challenge that the archivist has in terms of working with agencies on their information and the oversight of that. That's why I said I'm not jealous of that part. I am very, and we are working on this part. There's a program called Citizen Archivist. It's a crowdsourcing thing that they are getting people to help them translate the cursive in manuscripts, because a lot of people can't read cursive. And that's another part of it. That's the librarian is shaking her
Yeah,
head
you know,
this time.
I'm very concerned about information, period. Is there going to be a Library of Congress alt site pretty soon? Because that's what I'll read.
Good thing about all this concern about information is that there's concern about information. Okay, we have put the lens on, just like I said, librarians are having a moment. This is really a good opportunity to talk about information, to talk about sources, to work with young people about that. I've mentioned that in terms of, for instance, copyright. That as we have more digital natives, and I look at you two, you are definitely digital natives. You never have ever seen a dial phone, right? Do you even know what that money, what is it? Okay, so you have a set of digital natives, 4-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 1-year-olds that do this. All right, they're coming out doing this. They go up to a screen and they know something's supposed to happen. As we're teaching them about internet safety on the internet, we should also be teaching them about information literacy. That's that old term that librarians talked about. What is information literacy? How do you tell what's what on the internet? And also rights. And in all of the discussions that I've had about copyright and things like that, the thing that I've also mentioned was that we should tell and have this thing see, when young people see that, they know, stop, caution, you can't use it in a certain way, or to think about that we need to think about all of the literacies and things that we need to start working with young people as soon as possible. Because they are getting online very soon and very fast.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks so much for coming. We've talked a lot today about how the information inside of libraries is changing, how that content mix is changing from physical artifacts into more digital artifacts. I'm just curious if you have thought about and you can elaborate on how the role of the library might change going forward. UC Berkeley students know that the main undergraduate library here actually has almost no books in it anymore. It has been completely renovated for teamwork and collaboration. I'm wondering if you could speak to that. Thank you.
And that's happening in public libraries as well. Because as more of content, especially science and other subjects, are coming out digitally, they're born digital. Libraries are acquiring materials in that way. And so the actual physical books, that's more of a choice, and they're looking at space. And there are just about any public library now you go to, in school libraries and grammar schools and high schools, are looking at library as place. And so there are going to be more spaces, learning labs, places where people can create their own information and materials. More people still want to, even if they're all sitting, I went up to your beautiful reading room upstairs, and everyone was on a computer and all together. And so people still, even if they're getting things digitally, they find that they still want to be with other humans. So there's a lot of consideration about what do we do with the spaces in libraries and how we reconfigure them. So that most of the library conferences now have sessions and things on library as place and space in communities, whatever it's on a campus or in a community. Also, there are more discussions about partnering with other community-based organizations. So you might have the health department there, you might join in with a rec center, you might look at other types of services to be in the space. So there's a lot going on with that. And exciting too.
Going back to your original call from the president, can you elaborate a little bit about that and what that was like? And do you see yourself as, like, or as I see you as the hero?
Where is your mother when you need it? All she wants to know is, did you call someone? For that. If people think that, I appreciate that. The main part of it was looking at making this treasure chest accessible to people, and something that could inform and bring enjoyment. This is a wonderful, wonderful research institution, but anyone can be a researcher and anyone can use it. And so that was the gist of the wonderful conversation that I had, an opportunity, and I was very honored to talk about that with him. What could it be? What are the opportunities for the Library Commons? And that was really heartening with that. I must say, too, that in the process of the confirmation process, I got to meet a lot of legislators, and I was also heartened by the fact that many of them, I'd say almost everyone I met, talked about history, their respect for history, their respect for the Library of Congress, and that was very heartening too, and I think everyone should know that.
I think we've got time for one more question from the audience before we finish up.
Oh, well.
So not everyone can go into librarianship, but what can people do, especially young people getting ready to kind of take on the world, graduating from places like UC Berkeley? What can they kind of do to help with this vision of making information accessible and kind of having everyone have access to our nation's treasures?
When I went to that San Francisco Public Library Teen Mix Center, I mentioned that some of the young people one young lady was homeless, and the library was her refuge. They felt like outcasts, and they needed that to not only give your voice, but share your talents, share your experiences with other young people who are not that far behind you. that's where a lot of the needs are. A lot of them might not be as fortunate to have caregivers or people in their lives to help them. And that's why they're flooding into those public libraries and sitting around and causing trouble sometimes, and looking like, oh, but they're there because there's a need. And I would just ask that you have so much to give and to show other young people coming up. The best thing that I've ever told somebody is how nerdy I was. It wasn't cool. I said, but now you're at the Library of Congress. I said, that's the point. So reaching, not back, but pulling somebody else with you.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for Dr.
Just studying.
Before we end the event, I'd like to invite our president, Daniel Ahrens, back up to the stage for closing remarks.
So I'd like to once again thank Dr. Carla Hayden and our student moderator, Haley Kakovitz, for hosting a great conversation this evening. The Berkeley Forum hosts a lot of great speakers. For every speaker we host, we design a custom poster for them.
Ooh.
And so as part of our gratitude for Carla Hayden for visiting, along with all the many libraries she's visiting, we have a framed poster for her. So we'd like to thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Put this in a very prominent place. You know I was at Berkeley.
Well, we're definitely delighted to have you. With that, we have one more event this semester. So if you're interested in all this discussion of digital information, we have an event on journalism and the internet this Thursday at 6:30 p.m. in the Unit 2 Cunningham Main Lounge. So please join us for that. We have 2017 Pulitzer Prize winner David Farenthold joining the panel, so it'll be a really exciting event. But thank you all for being here tonight, and I look forward to you seeing at any or all of our events in the future. Thank you.